Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining our press briefing on the economic outlook for the Middle East and Central Asia. And many thanks to many of you who have come to Marrakesh to cover our annual meetings. We are going to start with opening remarks from Jihad Azour, Director of the Middle East and Central Asia Department, and then we will take your questions. We do have interpretation into Arabic and French, and you can ask your questions in those languages. Thank you. Jihad.
Thank you very much, Wafa. Good morning and welcome to the 2023 annual meetings here in Marrakesh. I would like to extend our gratitude to the Moroccan authorities for hosting this annual meetings in this beautiful city of Marrakesh, despite the difficulties and the challenges dealing with this heartbreaking natural catastrophe, the earthquake that hit the city a month ago. Our thoughts are with the people of Morocco, and we stand ready to help the authorities in dealing with this issue. Let me summarize where we see the region, economics prospects and policy priorities before taking your questions. Growth in many economies in the Middle East and Central Asia is slowing, reflecting the combined effect of tighter policies, oil production cuts, geopolitical tensions, and other domestic challenges. Starting with the Middle East and North Africa, we have lowered our real GDP growth forecast to 2% for 2023, a downgrade by 1.1 percentage point from our last projections in April. Growth will accelerate to 3.4% in 2024 as some of these factors fade. Persistent structural hurdles will constrain growth over the forecast horizon, and importantly, growth is not forecast to be strong or inclusive enough to create the needed jobs for the 100 million Arab youth who will reach working age over the next 10 years. Moving to Caucasus and Central Asia. For the Caucasus and Central Asia, GDP growth is projected to remain relatively robust, 4.6% this year. It's a 0.3% upgrade since last April. It is reflecting the still strong trade and financial flows from Russia. Growth will likely ease in 2024 to 4.2%, a 0.3 percentage point downgrade compared to April, as these flows gradually normalize. Persistent structural challenges will mean that medium-term growth remains lackluster. Inflation is easing, but large differences between countries persist. For example, in MENA, inflation is slowing, but it remains high in Egypt or in Sudan. Excluding these two countries, average inflation in MENA is projected to peak at 13.4% this year, before falling to 9.7% in 2024. In the Caucasus and Central Asia, price pressures are expected to continue abating, easing from 11% in 2023 to 8.3% next year. Financing conditions in the region remain generally tight. MENA central banks have continued raising rates in 2023, albeit at a slower pace than that of last year. The monetary policy tightening cycle appears to have peaked in the CCA. A higher for longer interest rate environment could strain corporate, financial institution, and public finance in the region, with implications for banking sector profitability, credit provision, economic growth, and financial stability. Sovereign bank linkages may worsen with implications of higher for longer. The balance of risk has improved since April, as adverse global challenges have receded, but risks remain tilted to the downside, as we saw last week, and climate-related threats are rising. On the upside, A faster than anticipated global decline in inflation would reduce pressure on central banks to raise interest rates further. Downside risks include reduced external demand if China were to experience a sharper than expected slowdown, reignited global price pressure, for example, because of an escalation of the war in Ukraine, climate change related or natural disaster, which can have wide-ranging economic and social impact. The recent earthquake in Morocco and the floods in Libya provide a stark reminder on how national disasters can have rapid and devastating consequences. What are the main priorities? Policy space, as you know, is limited in the wake of recent shocks, and policymakers face difficult choices. Price stability should remain the focus of monetary policy. Where inflationary pressure are persistent, monetary policy should remain tight until signals of sustained disinflation are well established. Further tightening may be required in some economies such as Egypt and Tunisia. Where inflation is returning to target and underlying inflationary pressure are receding, any policy easing should be done cautiously and with due attention to signs of renewed price pressures. Fiscal consolidation efforts should focus on building buffers and safeguarding debt sustainability, especially in emerging markets and those economies with high debt levels and financing needs. Oil exporters should focus on economic diversification and boosting fiscal buffers to strengthen resilience. All countries would benefit from domestic revenue mobilization and increased spending efficiency. Fiscal reforms that help increase budget transparency and the adoption of credible medium-term fiscal frameworks will help reach domestic goals and facilitate access to international financial markets. Structural reforms can help support near-term growth and longer-term growth prospects at the same time. Our outlook shows that sequencing and packaging reforms strategically can magnify growth dividend. A first-generation reform package that includes governance, external sector, and regulatory framework could increase output by almost 10% over 5 years. Governance reforms can generate positive output effects even during period of weak growth and limited policy space. Major governance reforms could increase output by about 6% over 5 years. The benefits extend beyond governance. Regulatory quality reforms have a positive impact on output, contributing to a 4% increase after 5 years. With annual meetings taking place in the Arab world, after 2 decades, the time is ripe to rethink the region's development model. Promoting inclusive growth will require substantial reforms to close the gap between the developed model of the past and what is needed going forward. Last but not the least, what the IMF is doing to help the region. Well, as you know, the IMF continues to engage closely with Middle East as well as also Central Asian countries to provide policy advice, technical support, as well as financing. We have approved $34 billion in financing to 15 countries in both Middle East and Central Asia since the onset of the pandemic, and fund has allocated $49.3 billion additional financing through the SDRs, the special drawing rights. In the past year alone, IMF programs were approved for Armenia, Egypt, Mauritania, Morocco, and Pakistan. Morocco recently became the first country in the MENA region to secure financing under the fund's resiliency and sustainability facility. The RSF provides, as you know, long-term financing to strengthen economic resilience by supporting policy reforms that reduce climate-related risk, among other priorities. Together with our partners at the DIFC, we will formally launch the Regional Economic Outlook today at 11:30. I would like to invite you all. We will have a distinguished panel of outstanding experts who will share their views about the region. With that, I would like to thank you, welcome you, and turn the floor back to Wafa for the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Jihad. We'll take your questions now. We'll start with the lady in the front seat, please. Please introduce yourself.
صباح الخير نهى يوسف من
Good morning. Nuha Youssef, Media, Morocco. My first question to Dr. Jihad Azour. After the success in Morocco at the currency level and with the current microeconomic outlook, what would you suggest Morocco should do at this point? And then Morocco is the first country in the region, as you said, to benefit from the support of the IMF. Could you tell us about your assessment to what the kingdom has been doing and how it has been able to move forward despite the earthquake that you mentioned and its huge repercussions on the situation? It was still able, Morocco, to organize this meeting. Thank you very much. Let me first confirm one point. The economic policy needs to be integrated. We cannot have one single economic policy. Policies at the financial and economic level should go hand in hand. When it comes to monetary policy, the kingdom has been successful in managing these policies, especially in reducing inflation. And the main goal of the monetary policy is to keep prices stable. During the last few years, and despite the recurrent shocks, including the COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, the increase in oil prices, and so on, the central bank in Morocco and the financial authorities were still able to improve the financial and monetary situation and to keep the banking sector strong. After the COVID-19 pandemic, also there was support to the private sector, and the kingdom was able to improve the economic situation. Now, moving to the next phase, despite the fact that inflation is receding in Morocco and in the region as a whole, Morocco needs to still improve its monetary policy to keep improving the situation of inflation, because inflation has a very negative repercussions on lower income categories of the society. As for the program with the IMF, it's a new one, as you know. Its aim is to support countries to move toward a strategic change, especially to take climate into consideration. And Morocco was able to benefit from a financing from the RST, and this is is based on a series of programs and reforms adopted by Morocco. This is not the first program in the region. This is the first program that brings a series of measures to support resiliency in Morocco. And this program also is completing the financing that Morocco was able to get from the IMF, the financing to help Morocco face different risks. And this is one of the very adapted lines of credit provided by the IMF. Thank you, Jihad.
From Kazakhstan. My question will be about trade and regional cooperation in the region. It plays a pivotal role in developing landlocked countries like Kazakhstan. The country had to reorient its trade routes in light of Russia's war in Ukraine. There is middle corridor connecting China and Central Asia with South Caucasus and Turkey and Europe. Are there any initiatives that IMF supports to improve connectivity in Central Asia and its trade to promote economic growth? Thank you.
Thank you very much for this question. Yes, indeed. This is a priority that we at the fund, we have been working on for the last few years. And we have developed several opportunities to promote regional integration. And I would encourage you to read the recent paper that we issued on what are the growth levers and potential benefits of integration in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Of course, the recent development with the war in Ukraine have created new challenges, but also have provided some opportunities for countries to build on. And for that purpose, also, we are happy to see that there is greater cooperation between Caucasus and Central Asia, as well as also other parts, for example, with the Gulf. This year, a summit took place between GCC and CCA on promoting regional cooperation. And this is something that we encourage and we work on through promoting trade integration, infrastructure integration, not only in terms of road network, rail network, but also electricity network. And there are certain number of initiatives that one could build on, in addition to growing the regional financial markets and uniform some of the regulations between countries. Of course, this is very important to build a new, I would say, growth model for the region and bring back the level of growth to what it was maybe a decade ago, to allow those economies to converge faster with the emerging European countries.
Thank you. We have a question to the lady in the second row, please, third row.
عسلامة نادي عطية من وكالة تونس أفريقيا الأنباء أسأل عن مدى.
My question is about the chances of an ongoing cooperation between the IMF and Tunisia. We know that the talks has been suspended since October 2022. Now we know that Tunisia was able to improve its financial situation. Well, we are still in touch. I mean, the IMF and Tunisia are still having talks, and we expect a mission from the IMF to visit Tunisia and to assess the Article 4 in the framework of the Article 4 consultations. And as you know, this is one of the main tasks of the IMF. There is also the technical assistance provided by the IMF to Tunisia on a series of reforms that the government is carrying, and there is also the cooperation with the central bank. So this is the situation now about cooperation between the IMF and the Tunisian government.
Thank you very much. أنا دينا سالم من قناة القاهرة الإخبارية.
I'm Nadine Salim from Cairo, Egypt, and my question is in regards to how do you evaluate the situations in Egypt, especially in light of the higher level of debts and the economic rating of Egypt and some of the banks, and you advise to create fiscal buffers for countries in this kind of crisis. How can we implement that in light of this high level of debts?
So let's take the questions on Egypt. You have a question on Egypt? Yes, please go ahead.
Khadija Zerwal from Morocco. According to the IMF's projections, no.
نرجع للمغرب.
أكيد.
اوكي اخلي سؤالي يعني
We'll only take questions about Egypt only for now. Now we'll go back to Morocco. Is there any questions about Egypt right now? So we have also a question on
Dua Ahram online. What are the IMF's estimations for the financing gap Egypt suffers through the end of the EFF program? We have another question also from Fatma Ibrahim Aman Amwal Al Ghad magazine. What are the indicators did you rely on in your forecasts for the Egyptian economy? And what are your forecasts for Egyptian pound during 2024? So these are the questions that we have on Egypt.
Okay. خليني ابتدي بسؤال.
Let me start with answering the first question in regards about the fiscal buffers. There is no doubt that the Egyptian economy faced several shocks in recent years, especially when it comes to the war in Ukraine, which had a huge impact on the economy there, because Egypt also been importing commodities. In addition, that the tourism sector was affected in Egypt due to that shock. In addition to emerging markets, countries were affected as well due to the high interest rates, which had again an impact on the emerging markets as well. Moreover, this is why we decided to, or the Egyptian government decided to design a program that is based on 3 pillars. The first pillar is to revive the economy. In the previous programs that was mutual by the IMF and the Egyptian government, and here I go back to 2016 and 2020 in light of the COVID-19, to secure $8.5 billion in providing this amount of money only in 2 months to revive the Egyptian economy at that time. So the first pillar is to revive the economy. The second pillar is to preserve the macroeconomic stability by dealing with the high interest rate and because the inflation that hit all the citizens there. In addition, how to preserve the capabilities of the Egyptian when it comes to the fiscal policies. This is the second pillar. The third pillar is to give more space to the private sector to lead the economy, and that requires 2 factors. First, to review the role of the state-run institutions and to have an equal opportunity to the private sector, and that we have also a flexible exchange rate to protect the Egyptian economy against external shocks, especially that we are witnessing huge external shocks in light of what we are witnessing, higher for longer. So this is a major procedure or measure to protect the Egyptian economy. In addition, the Ministry of Finance in Egypt tried its best to enhance its performance and in terms of the public funding, that will contribute as well to lift the burden of the high prices. And this is in the right direction. And to create the right objectives. What are the right objectives? To preserve a sound budget. Secondly, to reduce the debt service costs. And thirdly, to increase the flexibility in the budget. When it comes to Dua's question, Dua, I would like to tell you, when we talk about the financing gap, we have to a comprehensive view when it comes to the measures of the program. Financial gap is here looking into what are the measures taking on one hand to provide more partnerships with the private sector, and also in terms of what is the budget and what are needed in the public funding. and that is that will help in dealing with the funding gap. And when it comes to our indicators, when we look into, for example, the exchange rate, and when we talk about the flexible exchange rate, depending on the market mechanism, in other words, demand and supply, that will decide the real rates of the exchange rate. And it's been periodically by our periodic review to the program, especially in light of the latest development that the decline of the global economies on one hand, and secondly the increase in the interest rates globally as well.
Please.
Hello, my name is Magnus Sherman. I'm with Reorg in London. I wanted to touch on Lebanon. In the staff level agreement from last year, you drew up a long list of reform requirements to unlock the loan package. And there's been very little progress on that since then. And of course, the people of Lebanon are suffering a great deal. Is there any way the IMF would, consider less than that very long, comprehensive list of reforms before slowly releasing some of those funds? Thank you.
We don't have any further questions on Lebanon, right?
Well, thank you very much for your question on Lebanon. As you know, the program, the staff level agreement, it's not the program, but the agreement between the staff and the authorities took place April 7, 2022, almost a year and a half. And what we call the prior actions, i.e. the actions that are required before enacting the program, I think we're three, that are needed not only for the program, but for the emergency of the situation and the stabilization of the Lebanese financial situation and the Lebanese economy. And let me remind you of those three. One is to pass a law on capital control in order to allow Lebanon to have the opportunity to do the overhauling of the financial sector. The second law was, in addition to the capital control, was on, let me go to my notes. Yes, on the bank resolution, which is also something that you need before the overall reform package. And the third one was passing the budget at the time of 2022 and 2023. Therefore, those were the minimum requirements that you need in order to start reforming the system, especially that the gravity of the situation increased since the outbreak of the crisis in 2019. Therefore, those were needed measures with or without the program in order for Lebanon to start addressing the huge imbalances that exist, both financially and economically, address triple-digit inflation and an economy that was shrinking in the last few years.
Thank you. We have a question, the gentleman over there, then we'll turn to the left side.
Hello, Ahmed Al-Jishtimi.
Ahmed.
Has Tunisia presented any new program, a new proposal for a new program? And if it does present an alternative deal, how long will it take to negotiate one? And will it include subsidies cut? Thank you.
Did not propose any alternative to the program. But you are giving me the opportunity to reiterate that the reform of the subsidy that is benefiting the rich at a time where oil price is high is not only a fiscal waste, but also socially unfair. And therefore, by reforming the subsidy, you could allow more resources to go to finance inclusion and to increase social spending.
Thank you, Jihad. The lady in white on the 4th row, please. Yes, thank you.
غادة برعاد من وكالة
Jihad Azour from a French agency. In light of this war between Palestine and Israel, what are the consequences on the economy, and what are the advices we can offer to the countries that are already suffering from a dire situation in the region?
Do we have this other questions on the same topic? On the same topic? It's on the same topic? Okay, later then we can take your questions. Thank you.
شكرا.
Thank you for your question. It is so difficult to say or to predict what is going to happen economically according to this, what happened and what we could witness based on what is happening right now. Maybe we can talk about the short term, mid-term, long term. Even when we talk about the short term, it is so difficult to read what could happen, but based on what took place in the last few days, increase in the oil by $5 per barrel, but now it went back a little bit down. But actually, if you compare the oil prices today, is less compared to the oil prices 2 months ago. Yet I would like to confirm, and as you know, that in this kind of circumstances, it's so difficult to have an accurate reading to what will be the economic consequences, because there are so many developments taking place, but no doubt there will be an impact, of course, no doubt. But to ask me about the capability to decide what kind of impact or the size or the window of time that of this impact, and how these developments, the direction those the developments in the coming months and weeks. And to go back to the second question, talking about the financial and economical situation, when we witness that, we need that emphasize the importance of having buffers and reserves to confront these kind of developments that will help you swiftly to deal with this kind of consequences. Here, it is important then the good governance, economically and financially speaking. It's so important in this kind of situations.
Yes, the first seat.
Bonjour, Kautar Tali du quotidien.
Good morning. From a newspaper in Morocco, I have a question on Morocco. You talked about the country's resilience. Do you think that the Kingdom of Morocco is now ready to face future shocks? There are also sets of reforms that have been implemented. What are the urgent measures that Morocco should take to enhance its economic performance, given the uncertain context at the regional level?
Questions on Morocco. So we'll start here, and then we'll take your question.
I am Khadija. According to the IMF's reports, that Morocco will witness a kind of a recovery this year and the next year. So on what foundations you build your report in light of the circumstances the whole world is facing?
Fatem Zahra Basgher from what do you think are the factors that contributed to the resilience of the Moroccan economy? Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we have a question. The gentleman in white in the back on the left. Hadir, you're next.
صباح الخير للجميع.
Good morning, Youssef Yaqoubi من e-newspaper in Morocco. According to the latest projections that were issued yesterday from IMF in regards to Morocco, I would like it didn't take into consideration the consequences of the earthquake and especially what is happening in the Middle East and the war right now that's taking place. So how you can incorporate what is happening right now in your projections in your outlook for the next years, especially that we will host a major sports tournament that could have impact. As you mentioned earlier, the earthquake consequences could have, midterm and long-term consequences.
Microphone to the gentleman in front of you. Thank you.
شكرا سيدتي.
Thank you very much. Zakaria from Morocco, you mentioned to us that the level of the inflation reduced in Morocco because of the monetary policy in Morocco. But let me ask you the following. When we talk about developing countries like Morocco, is there a real link between the central bank's interest rate on one hand and the inflation on the other hand? Because when we compare the situation in the United States and Europe, the interest rate is high, but the inflation will not reduce. So we will have then a double shocks in this case, comparing our situation to Europe and the United States.
The lady.
Is there any other questions related to Morocco?
Excusez-moi.
I will be speaking French. We see that, even I'll speak in French even if English is an important language. Now, there are many shocks, but also many conditions imposed by the IMF and international organizations, sets of reforms and prerequisites in order to access financial aid. If I understand correctly, during these meetings, there seems to be a new direction, a new vision for financing developing countries. Could you share some more information regarding this new direction?
Okay.
We're going to start. We have enough
Thank
questions
you very
on
much.
Morocco.
A couple of questions came on the issue on resilience. I will answer them in Arabic and in French for those who asked Arabic and French.
Now, resilience is based on, or depends on many factors, on reforms that aim at reducing vulnerability, but also reforms that aim at increasing buffers to better face shocks. We are undoubtedly in a situation where shocks are multiplying and intensifying. This means that we need to continue to follow sound economic policies that allow us to maintain an economic balance, equilibrium, to strengthen the economy's capacities and to increase reserves. So this all means that you have to increase your immunity while not being complacent. This is the message for Morocco and for other countries that manage to weather the shocks. What we've seen in the past doesn't guarantee anything for the future. This is our recommendation. Now, increasing resiliency also goes through structural reforms, in enhancing the business climate, increasing investments, allowing companies to have more capacity and to not be so prone to interest rate increases. And also technology. This also allows companies to grow and to be better shielded from the effects of climate change, including in the rural sector and the agricultural sector. So we need to speed up these structural reforms. This is actually the topic of a chapter in our report that will be published soon after this briefing. So structural reforms are important. And then you had a question on projections. Now, of course, projections were established before the earthquake, and other institutions, namely the World Bank, and the IMF are now working on a report on the short, near, and long-term impact of this earthquake. And so we will be communicating on this. We are working hand in hand with the Moroccan authorities to be able to give more information. And I do think that the 3 billion facility will help deal with this issue.
Question about interest rate and inflation. As you may know, we need once again to state that the transmission mechanisms between the monetary policy and its impact on inflation can vary from one state to another. In some countries, it could need 6 months between the moment the decisions are made and the results. Sometimes it can go as high as 24 months. We also try to assess and compare countries on this issue, and many factors play a role. Factors about the finances and about many other things that have an impact on the speed of the impact of these policies on the ground. But inflation, of course, is a very negative factor. It leads to a lack of stability. It has a negative impact at the social level. In economics, the best way to treat the inflation problem is through interest rate and flexible currency rates. Now, we have lots of repercussions as well, because we do know that interest rates have been increasing at the global level and have an impact on the local level.
Tout d'abord, les conditions sont basées sur des réformes.
Now, first, we know, to answer your question, Madam, that reforms are a condition. It's to enhance the resiliency of the economy, to make the economy more inclusive. If you look at the program, of course, it comes with conditions, but these conditions allow a government through reforms to increase its resiliency and to boost its growth. And these conditions depend on a country's situation and depend on the country's needs and also the external context. Now, what can the IMF do to help? The IMF has many tools in its toolkit. First of all, it can adjust its help. As you know, during COVID, we completely changed our policy. We had rapid financing that allowed countries to fund their immediate needs and to protect the most vulnerable and preserve its their economic stability. In a few months, $100 million were distributed in the region. In less than 2 months, Tunisia was able to have $550 million. There are also $650 billion in SDRs that were distributed to increase liquidity, which was also an issue. And then climate issues, midterm transformation. How do you help countries that do not have the financial capacity to transform their economy, especially those that do not contribute to climate change but do feel the effects of it? And this was a very good program. Now, there are also other means to help countries. There are consultations, finding policies together with the authorities, and also technical assistance. This is not only for developing countries, but also for developed countries. These countries also benefit from our help.
In the front, and then we end.
Suhail Karam, Bloomberg. Say Jihad.
From Bloomberg, Mr. Jihad, there is a talk about the independency of the central bank in Tunisia, and the Tunisian president said that the central bank changed in some of the laws that allow to buy some loans to cover the deficit in the budget, especially that now we're planning for the 2024 budget. So there is a clear vision on our side. And you mentioned earlier that you are in touch with the Tunisian authorities, including the central bank. So I would like to know from you, what does it mean when in the context of Tunisia, and that would be a deal breaker or not with the talks with our central bank in Tunisia? In fact, when we talk about the central bank, it is the representative of Tunisia with us. So the communication actually is with all the players, with the Ministry of Finance, and also with the presidency as well. And it's ongoing communication. Let me remind you that when we designed our program for Tunisia last year, and actually this is something we're proud of. It was a program dedicated to Tunisia, and where a huge team planned and designed this program to support Tunisia by IMF, not only by IMF, but also the World Bank and the European Investment Bank also played a role here. I did not visit Tunisia recently, but you asked me about the independency of the central bank or central banks. Generally speaking, the independency of central banks serve a certain purpose that will allow them to do their jobs. It's not an absolute independency, but it has why there's a reason for that, to play its role, which is to provide the necessary pace for the central bank to preserve its first duty, which is the first duty is create stability in prices. Secondly, the stability of the financial sector. Thirdly, to support the government when it comes to their projections. So this is why it is important when we talk about it is a conditional independency, and most of the countries of the world adopted this. And when it comes to Tunisia, as I mentioned, there will be an IMF mission visiting Tunisia, looking into what are the economic developments that took place in Tunisia. Last year, for example, where several developments took place. This is why we have to look into the latest developments, to conduct consultations based on Article 4 consultations, and to continue this collaboration and work between the IMF and the Tunisian authorities.
Attending our press briefing on the Middle East and Central Asia economic outlook. Please stay for the panel discussion that will discuss the findings of the report following this press briefing. Thank you.
Bonjour. On est